Okay, so let's start over here. We'll do a review in Likkutei Sichos. This is in Chelek of Zion. This is volume 27. This is the first Sicha for the Parshas Tzav. It's a Rashi Sicha, very detailed Sicha, and we're learning this in memory of Levi Yitzchak ben Reb Chaim Tzvi, dedicated, successful shliach who was taken abruptly from us, and we're learning this to benefit his soul. Tehei nishmasi tzrura b'tzrira chaim. It's a sicha very, very complex. It's laws of the korbanos. Of course, this is Parshas Tzav, and the Rebbe comes up with a tremendous insight in the Rashi, in the simple Rashi, and also how it translates into mamash halacha. Uh, Very, very insightful in the sense the way you approach the sikha and get an understanding. But it's difficult. It's daf halten cup. You need to. So we'll go step by step. It basically it talks about when the carbon chatas has a special status. It's kodesh kodashim. A korban chatas can only be eaten by the male kohanim. It can only be eaten in the Azorah. It's very defined, as opposed to kachim kalim, which can be eaten by all the family people. It can be eaten in Yerushalayim. It's a very special holy status. The korban chatas, that's a sin offering that you bring for a sin or for committing a sin accidentally. That korban that gets a very strict chat. And we have some special halachas which are related to the korban chatas. And then we also, the korban chatas is eaten to the kahanim. So after shechting the animal, after sprinkling the blood, you take the meat of the animal and you cook it. And the Torah talks about what do you do with the pot in which you cook the meat. And the Torah says, depending on what kind of pot you use. If you use a klicheres, an earthen pot, then once you're done the cooking, you gotta break it. If you're cooking it in a copper pot, a metal pot, a copper pot, then you have to kasher it, and then you can use it further. So there's going to be a whole lot of discussion. Why do you have to break the earthenware? Do you have to break it because it has in it some of the chatos, and therefore we have the din of noiser? Noiser means the Torah says that the korban can be eaten, the chatos can be eaten the day that you shecht it, and up till the morning. So it's eaten for one day and the night. What happens if you didn't finish it till the nighttime? Then you have to burn it. You can't eat it later on. The korban, the carbon chatas becomes it's called noiser. Noiser is left over. You can't eat it after that. So if some of the carbon gets absorbed in the pot, you're cooking it, and when you cook, the carbon part of it goes into the pot. So it turns out that you will be eating, if you use the pot, you'll be eating chatas, because afterwards it gets again expelled in the food. It would be similar to anything non-kosher that you cook in a pot. You should be able to kasher it, or if it's an earthenware, you can't kasher it, so that you can't use that keli. I know I'm just saying bits and pieces because there's just so much details over here. I don't want to take up all the time now with the details. We'll discuss it as we go on. We'll go step by step. Aleph. Zwischen die Dine Hachatos in unser Parsha. So amongst the laws of the Chatos, that's the Korban Chatos in our Parsha, Zog the Torah. So the Torah states, Ukli cheres asher tevushal boy, the earthenware in which you cook the Chatos, yishaver, then that should be broken. The imbiklin the choishes bushalom, if it's cooked in a copper pot, metal pot, that could be kasher. So the pasuk says, umoirak, you gotta scrub it down, you gotta polish it up, and then vishuta b'mayim, then you have to rinse it in water. That's kosher. That's called hagaola. That's the water. You boil the water in it. Umurak vishuta b'mayim. So if you cooked it in an earthenware, the Torah says you got to get rid of it. You got to break it. If it's a copper, then you rinse it, you wash it down, you polish it down, and you rinse it off in water. Okay. So we'll learn some of the halachas as we go on. Stellt sich Rashi of dem Wort Yishover. So Rashi places himself on the word that says break. Why do we break? Uniz mefarish. And Rashi explains, why do we have to break it? Lefi shehabliya shenivlaz boy nase noiser. Because what it absorbs. If something cooks in a pot, some of what was cooked in the pot is absorbed into the walls, into the structure of the pot. The blia, that's a little different than if you cook something not kosher. What happens is the food, the taste, the tam of what you cooked in there gets absorbed inside the walls of the pot. Lefisha habelia shenivlaz boy, that the absorbed, that was absorbed inside the walls of the kela of the klicheres, nase noiser, that became noiser. Now, noiser, what is noiser? Noiser means that after the time that the Torah has given you to eat the korban chatos, after the time it becomes noiser. But here Rashi says that this will be the chiddush of the Rebbe Gevaldi later on. The Rebbe is going to explain, but let's just see the Pashut Pshat. The that was absorbed inside of the wall, nase noiser, becomes noiser. When does it become noiser? It would seem it becomes noiser after the nighttime, when the time that the korban can be eaten chatos. This has a little bit of the chatos in it, the taste of the chatos in it. That taste of the chatos becomes noiser. And Rashi adds, V'hu hadin l'chol hakochim. The same thing is true anytime you cook kochim. The kochim as we're learning now, the kochim inside the walls, after the time period allotted by the korban, by a korban shlomim, you can eat it for 2 days, one night in the middle and 2 days. So if you cooked in an earthenware, you have to break it because it becomes asur from the time, once it passes the time that the Torah has said that you could eat it. See, technically the taste of the chatos is in there, just like the chatos itself or the other korban itself has a period of time. Part of it, which is absorbed in the walls, also has that same period of time, and therefore it becomes nicer. What do we do with something which is left over? The Torah says you have to burn it. You just can't keep it around. You have to burn it. We burn the pot because the pot has nicer in it. What do we do with nicer? We burn nicer. Here, the nicer is the absorbed pot, the absorbed part that was been absorbed inside the walls has been left over after the time allotted. So you have a little bit of the chatos or any carbon left over beyond the time. And what do we do with leftovers? We burn it. So here, this case, can't burn the nechayshis, the earthenware, so you break it. So the Rebbe explains now the Rashi. Those was Rashi darf Aleph masbir sein dem tam hadin von Yeshover. Why is it necessary for Rashi to explain the reason why we have to break it? I mean, the Torah says that the pot that you cooked in it should be broken. Why does Rashi have to explain that because it absorbed? Why not say broken? Because the Torah says the pot that you cook, the chatas, has to be broken. Why do we need a reason b'chlal? And the other thing is we have to understand why Rashi gives the reason is, and Rashi also adds suleik and v'hu adin l'chol hakochim. And the same thing is true anytime you cook kodesh, you'd also, if you cook it in a earthenware, you have to break it. You shove it, you have to break it. Why is it important for Rashi to tell us over here what the din would be in another carbon also? What? So first of all, why does Rashi have to explain? Torah says the pot that you cook in has to be broken. End of story. And the second thing, why does Rashi have to say the same thing in Ol Kachim? So the Rebbe says we can say very simply. Because, and here the Rebbe is going to explain what's going on. There is something unique and special about Chatas. And we're going to go to the previous pasuk. Their pasuk, Ukli Cheres Goimer, this pasuk that talks about the pot you cooked in, kum behemshech zum frier dicken pasuk. This comes as a continuation of the previous verse. Wo es wird gesagt der Din, where the halacha is said von dam chatus. Over there, the pasuk talks about the blood of the chatas. Here we're talking about cooking the meat of the chatas, but the previous pasuk talks about the blood of the chatas. Now we know that the blood of the chatas you shecht it, and there's blood over there. You sprinkle the blood, you collect the blood, you put it on the mizbeach. That's part of the process of the korban chatas. So there's blood around. So what happens while we're talking about the blood of the chatos? The previous pasuk discusses that vasher yizom midom alabeg, by accident, some of the blood that you are handling sprinkled onto the garment. You got a stain from the blood into the garment. Now, this is, you're not eating the garments here, and it's blood. We're not talking anything like in the next pasuk. We're talking about what are we supposed to do with a garment that had some blood? It has a blood stain. The blood from the chatos is in it. So the pasuk says, "Techabes b'mokim kodesh." You have to launder it. You have to wash it in a holy place, which means you can't just take it home. You can't take it away to the river and launder it there, wash it there, because just like the chatos itself is not allowed to leave the area of the Azora, it needs to be b'makom kodesh. That's where we eat it. It can't take it out. The blood that's sprinkled from the korban chatos on the garment has to be washed right over there. It has to be washed to clean it off from the blood stain. Was der chiyuv. Now, what should happen if you have a stain of blood from another carbon. Let's say you have a shlomim, you have a stain of blood. We don't have the same halacha. Over there is no din. You stain, whenever you're going to launder your clothing, you'll wash it off. There's no problem. Here, there's a special, unique halacha by achatos that stain needs to be washed over there. Was der chiyuv is do blois by chatos. That obligation to wash the garment is only by chatos. Unit by ken under korban, by no other korban. V'alpizeh. So, since we see that there's a unique stringency by korban chatos, the Torah says that you have to wash it over there. It has nothing to do with a general thing of a korban. Any other korban that you get on your clothing, you don't have to do anything with it. Whenever you'll wash your clothing, you'll wash it. But over here, the Torah gives you a special halacha unique to chatos. So the following pasuk should also be interpreted as a special halacha by chatos. Both men gedarft lernen, so we should have seemingly learned, as der pasuk uklicheres goimer, that this pasuk, when it talks about the earthenware, which follows immediately the previous halacha by chatos, is oich adin miyuchad by chatos. This is also a unique, special din by chatos. As mitzad der chumre from chatos, because chatos is so stringent with all the halachas of chatos, wird bald a chiyuv arois zu nemen de blias hachatos von der kli. So there is an immediate, we don't want that chatos to be inside the kli. It got sprinkled. It cooked over there. It cooked. You're cooked. You have chatas in the kli now. You have, because you cooked it in it. So there's an obligation to take out the chatas that went into the kli. Vidama chatas from the beged, just like we have to take out the blood of the chatas from the garment. You're not eating the garment. It's not. But the Torah doesn't want blood of the chatas to be in the garment. The Torah wants you to launder it right away. Und der Far sagt the Torah, and that's what the Torah says, as a kli cheres, from welchen men can nit arois nemen de blia kli cheres, for which you cannot take out what was absorbed. Rashi zog der noch, Rashi will say it later on, we will talk about it in a minute. Kli cheres eine yoytze midei dofye lo'ilom, that a kli cheres will never go out, this, what it absorbed, will never go out. The dofye, the absorbing of what it absorbed, will never go out. It only goes out a little bit at a time, so it always remains something in there. So memela, we can't get the chatos out of that keli. Is there din as yishaber? That's why you have to break it, and that would be the difference between. It has nothing to do with that it absorbed chatos. It becomes noiser. It becomes leftover. It's nothing to do with leftover. Nothing to do with the regular din of korban. You can't have leftover. It has to do with a din that chatos cannot stay in a garment and chatos cannot stay in a keli. If you cooked it in the keli and it absorbed chatos, you got to either break it or get rid of it right away by expelling, by nechoshes, by kshutu. That would be the first approach. So Rashi is shoylel dem pirush and sagt, no. Rashi rejects und sagt, as der din von Yishover, why do we have to break this kli cheres, is nicht verbunden mit dem Chomer von chatos. It's not tied to the stringency of chatos. Not because chatos is, it's got to get rid of the blood of the chatos, not connected. Nor she'abliya lefi she'abliyas sheniva. Las boy nasa nicer. It becomes nicer. What has been absorbed in it, when you cooked, it absorbed the chatas, and therefore it becomes leftover. Ubemela, again, leftover when the time comes. Ubemela. So therefore, this is already a regular din that any kachim beyond the time becomes nicer. Weil bei alle kachim is verandert din nicer. The law of nicer is everywhere. Nicht wie der din von dam chatos from Friedrich Posik. That's why Rashi emphasizes it. It's not like the law of the dam chatos of the previous posik, which is only applicable to a chatos. When chatos falls on clothing, that you must immediately wash it over there. By other kabbanas, we don't have this din. But over here, this has to do with the fact that the pot that you cooked and absorbed. And that would be the same by all carbonas, that it would become nice. Okay. So basically, what Rashi is telling us, the reason why you have to break this pot in which you cooked the klicheres, in which you cooked the carbon chatas, you have to break it, is not because somehow a chatas is a stringent, the things that you use with a chatas you have to break. It has to do with the regular din. The din that we learned before, that you have to wash the garment, that has to do with a chatas specifically. Because only by a chatas we say you have to wash the garment. Other things you'll wash whenever you'll wash it. But here by the keli, don't think that it is a chatas din in which you have to break it because it's a chatas, or a klicheres you have to rinse it off because it's a chatas. No, it has to do with it absorbed, and the absorbed becomes noiser. And therefore, with noiser, by klicheres you burn it, because you can't, by klicheres you break it because you can't kasher it, and by nechesh you kasher. But the question is, why does Rashi Taka choose to learn this way? Why doesn't Rashi learn that this is connected to the previous din? But that itself we need to understand. Was is der hechrech im pshute shel mikro, to learn what forces us when we're learning the simple pshat in the pasuk, to learn, to interpret. As their tam is mitzad isur noiser, that the reason is because of the provision of noiser. And b'meila hu adin l'chol hakochim, the meila, the whole thing is same thing as all kochim, because this has to do with the absorbing and not going beyond the time. Unit wie es is l'chayre mashma from pashtus hamsach psukim, and not how we would seem from the simple flow of the verses. Ados is adin miyuchad by chatas. It's a special loch by chatas. Al derech vider din shelifnei zeh from dam chatas, similar to the din that we learned before, which is by the din of chatas. But the Rebbe is asking over here that there's two possibilities, it would seem, to learn. Why do you need to break, or why do you need to rinse out the pot? Whether it's because of the stringency of chatos, just like in the previous halacha, when blood falls on the garment, you have to rinse it because of the stringency of chatos, and it's a unique halacha by chatos. Or, as Rashi learns, that this is really because it absorbed from the carbon, and any carbon that you absorb, and once it goes past the time, it becomes nicer. And that's what Rashi is trying to tell you, that it's the second that is because of the nicer that it gets left over. And the question is, why does Rashi learn like that? As the Rebbe will explain, that it would make more sense to say l'chayre that this is a din and chatas. V'adrab. L'chayre is shver zu onem and al derech hapshat. It is difficult to accept when we learn by the simple meaning as the din fun yeshover is mitzad isur noiser, that the reason why we break it is because it becomes nicer, because vile. So the Rebbe explains this doesn't really fit with the idea of noiser. Noiser would mean left over from what you had before. So if you have the meat of the chatas and a little piece of it left over, that remains nicer because it's left over from the bigger piece of meat. So then you have to burn it. But here, there's nothing left over. It's a taste. Why would that be nicer? So it's hard to say the absorbed part in the pot is left over. Aleph. Bepashtas legt sich nicht zu sagen, as if der Blia. It's simply, it doesn't really fit to say that on the absorption in the pot, in the walls of the pot from the chatos that was cooked, soll sich legen der geder neuser, that it should apply to it the definition of leftover. Warum der Teich von Neusser, because the translation of Neusser is an Überbleib von dem, was not früher gegessen. That's left over from that which you ate before. Left over from before. Behainu ametzias mamoshis means a actual substance, something of substance, an entity of substance. Was is nicht in lachila, you can eat it. Not something which is in a pot. Mashenki in the bliya bekli, the absorbing in the pot, welchi is nit begeder achila. It's not something in the boundaries of eating. You can't eat it. Ubemela euch nit kein neuser von der Vashanechel. So therefore, it's not really left over for something which is eaten. It's not an edible. So how can we call this leftover? So it really doesn't fit so much pshat to call this leftover. So that's one difficult with Rashi's pshat. And number two, leftover, it only becomes after the time. So when is Yishavir? When the Torah says if it's cooked in an earthenware, klecheres, you have to break when? You have to break it right away. You can wait till the end of the day because it doesn't become nicer till later on, till after the night, because it has the day that you shechted it and until the next night. So why does the Torah not say Yishavir left over in the pot? You have to break it when it comes left over. Over here, it's mashma that you break it immediately, and that would be chumra of dam chatas. If chatas or the chumra of chatas, when you cook chatas and something, you got to break that pot immediately. Base. If der Yishover is mitzad isur noiser, if breaking it is because of the prohibition of having left over, because it's going to go beyond the allotted time, hastes as der chiyuv when Yishover is chal. So that means that the obligation to break it, when does it apply? Nicht gleich noch ein bisschen, not immediately after the cooking, because it's not noiser yet. Noiser becomes after the night, the day, night that follows the day. Nor erst noch dem bis endigt sich der Zman achilas hakorban, only after the time of eating the korban finishes, when es wird noiser, that's when it becomes noiser. Hat the Torah gedarft uns geben dem Zman, the Torah should have indicated the time, give us the time for the Chiv HaShvira, when you have to break it. Just like the Torah says, the leftover, when does it become leftover? After the time. Noiser menu ad baker, after the morning. So the pot has to be broken then. Punkt with the Torah giton dem zman when der isur noiser is chal. Just that the Torah gives us the time when the prohibition of leftover applies. Oifum basar hakorban, the meat of the korban. The Torah should give us when is the isur noiser applied to the keli in which you cook the korban, that it's in the night. If we learn that it's a chumrah of a chatos, when you cook the chatos, the Torah says you got to break the dish right away because it absorbed from the chatos, it cooked the chatos in it. We don't want you to keep that keli. We want you to get rid of it right away. It's just like a garment that's sprinkled in the previous pasuk that you have blood of the chatos, you have to wash it right away. But now you're saying that it's the din of Noiser. Noiser is not till later. So the Rebbe argues that Rashi would have good reason to translate it, Taka, that this is because of the Chumrah of Chatas and not because of what it absorbed. So why does Rashi Taka choose to say that it's because of the absorbed that they cooked in it and it absorbed from the Chatas? That's why you have to either break it or then you have to rinse it off. As the Rebbe will continue to bring now the second part of the pasuk, what happens if you cook it in a copper pot? And here the Rebbe is going to also ask, it seems to me Rashi interrupts, as we'll see inside. Beis, ois beis. Weiter is Rashi meitig dem Wort moirak und is mefarish. What does it mean? The pasuk says that im beklei nechoshes busholo moirak v'shuta b'mayim. What does moirak mean? So Rashi says loshon tamruke hanoshim. It's like the pasuk in Megillah talks about in Megillah Sester. It talks about the tamruke hanoshim. That is shines up, polishes up women, how they beautify themselves by cleaning themselves up in a way of moirak. So that means to clean up the vessel, to shine it up, to polish it up. Das heißt, adover hamitzachtach, something that polishes. Women used to polish themselves up to make themselves beautiful. That's the moirak. But the noch is mighty, and then he quotes what the pasuk says. So Rashi teaches umoirak, and then it says umoirak v'shutaf. So you polish it, and then you rinse it. Uris mefarish. What do you shutaf? What does that do? Lifloit as bliyosei, to expel what it is, what it absorbed. So we're talking about the nechoshes over here, the copper, that is expelling when you rinse it or boil it, really shutaf, in the water to expel that which it absorbed. What it absorbed inside the walls when you cooked the chatos in this clay nechoshes. So now you're going to rinse it to expel what it has absorbed. But you can't do this, says Rashi, to the copper part. Avol klicheres, but klicheres, limdo hakosuv kan, the pasuk teaches you here, since the Torah doesn't give the klicheres the option to polish it and rinse it and kasher it, hagola, the Torah teaches you it will never completely go out. The walls will never go out from that little bit of the absorbed that they absorbed, of that taste that's in the walls. It will never go out. It'll always be there. The dafya will always stay in the wall. Basically, that the Torah gives you an option by nechoshes, break it, get rid of the absorbing. But why does the Torah not give this option by klei nechoshes, by klicheres? Is because over there it won't help because it never goes out. So that's why you break it over there. That's the difference between this. So these two Rashis, the first and the last one, these are klicheres. You can't kasher because of what it absorbed, and the clay nechoshes you could kasher because murek v'shuta b'mayim. So Rashi should have written this both together without interruption. What the meaning of moirak is? This seems to be an interruption of it. Isn't it glad? The pirush Rashi of moirak v'shutaf leaf like das bliyosei, that is meant to expel what it has absorbed. Avol klicheres chulu, but a klicher is not the difference between the klicheres and the klinechoishes is doch a hemshech yoshor zum friedikum pirush oif yishover. This is a direct continuation of the previous pirush that you shall break it. Lifisha blia chulu naser noiser. Blia has become noiser, and mele you have to break it. But when but when you talk about a klein nechoishes, you can kasher it. But over here, ein yetzer dofil olam. Oto Rashi gedaf masmir zayin the beide pirushim. So Rashi should have said these two commentaries next to each other, not next to each other, und nicht mafsig sein zwischen sie mit dem Abteich von Wort und Merak, without interrupting between these two continuous pirush with the teaching what means umoirak. Welcher hat gekannt sagen noch pirush wegen Teuchner Inyan. He could have written what moirak means after saying the idea for umoirak v'shutaf, that it is to get rid of the belia mashenkin klecheres. He could have said at the end what umoirak means. Wie men gefind bekamen bekommen bepirush Rashi. We find in many places in Rashi, as früher ist mefarish dem Teuchner Inyan. First, he explains the idea of the, and then noch dem Pirish Hatev, and then he gives us the meaning of the word. Okay, so first, just the Rebbe asked that these two Rashi should be together because it's one follows the other. But the question is that the Rebbe wants to know, it seems from Rashi that because we're not giving the same advice for the Klecheres like we're giving to the advice for the Klei Nechoshes, that you should kasher it, and we didn't say it before, so you learn that you can't kasher it. Why do we have to learn this only after we see that you could kasher, that you could take care of a Klei Nechoshes? Just by the fact alone, we say that you have to break it. Why would you have to break it if it can be kosher? So you know that you can't kosher it just because they have to break it. Even before we know that a klei nechoshes could be kosher. And then you know, so how come we don't say this by but we already said before that you have to break the klei cheres. So we know. In the Pirush of Merush is not move on. From them was Rashi is Messiah. Rashi concludes, Avol klicheres lomdoch hakosuf kan. But klicheres, the Pasuk teaches you here, that the Keli will never get rid of this, what it absorbed, the dofya, forever is mashma. So it appears as from them din yishover says break it, was state by klicheres gufa, which is the Torah says break the klicheres. Volt man nit gewusst as eine yotze mit the dofya leila. We still wouldn't know that it doesn't yikazim dofya leila. Nor me learned us up, but where do we learn it up? From them din umoirak v'shoitav livlets b'liyosei. Now that by klei nechoshes, it says that you polish it up and you rinse it off, you boil it to expel b'liyosei by klei nechoshes, and we know that klei cheres doesn't happen. It's tamua. Why can't we learn it from Yeshover itself? Since Rashi himself gives the reason, says, as the time when Yeshover, why do we have to break it? Is mitzad der bliya shenivlas by because it absorbed. So that itself is evidence that you can't expel it because otherwise would you have to break it? Is dos habavais, so that's proof. As is nitokein efshori is that there's no possibility as the bliyas on niflot veren legamri, that totally it can't funak lecheres, because otherwise why would the Torah tell to break a klecheres? So it means that it can never any of yiloilom by the mere fact that you say break it, not because we see by a klei nechoshes that you could take it out. Can't we learn it from the fact that the Torah says Yeshover? If there's a possibility to expel what it absorbed, is adrabah. Then why would the Torah say to break it? The Torah should say to expel it by boiling it. Is adrabah. Because maybe you're going to argue and say, Torah gives you one or two ideas. Maybe the Torah said Yeshover, but it doesn't mean that you can't also. No, if you could expel it, you can take it out, the absorb what it absorbed, and you can get rid of it, then the Torah wouldn't tell you Shaver, because expelling is a better solution than breaking it, because breaking it, it's still there in the pieces. When you expel it, you dissolve it into the water. If you have the possibility to expel what it absorbed, is adrabah. Then on the contrary, durch zu brechen de klicheres wird der Isur belohnt nit bottle min ha'olam. By breaking it, the klicheres, the prohibited, what was absorbed, it doesn't really cease in the world, doesn't stop its existence. Sein Metzies bleibt. Its existence remains in the shivre klicheres, in the broken pieces of the clay. Mashenke durch pleites ablias, but when you expel it, that is a bottle, then it becomes nullified. So the Torah, if there was a possibility for it to be nullified, then the Torah was set to nullify it. So the fact that Torah says break it, it means that you can't nullify it. So why does Rashi say we only know it? Because since we give the Eitzah baklicheres, that by klenachoshes, umoirech b'shutav b'mayim, we know now that klicheres you can't do that, but we know it from the fact that the Torah says to break it. So why is Rashi saying? So the Rebbe asks here, why does Rashi bring in the middle the taich of Meirich B'Shuta B'Mayim? And why does Rashi into it? The Rebbe would explain this whole thing, give us a whole new insight over here, and then the Rebbe is going to go on and on to explain to us what's going on over here. Ois Gimel, the Rebbe will now explain why Rashi chooses to learn that the reason for when you cook the basar chatos in a klicheres, that you have to break it is because you shover, because it absorbed the taste. It absorbed and it became noisor, that it's left over, instead of saying that this is the chumrah of chatos, that because it cooked chatos, which is kodesh, the Torah gives a gzeres hakosuf, just like the Torah said by dam, when it falls on a beged that you must remove it. The Torah says that if you cook it, you have to break the vessel. Why do we have to say that it is because of Neusar? And the Rebbe explains that this is what follows the previous pasuk, because in the previous pasuk, besides the din we were talking before, the blood that falls on a garment, which has that special din that you have to wash it right there in the Azorah to remove the blood, there's another din in the pasuk. In the beginning, the pasuk talks about anything that touches food that touches the chatos. And food that touches the chatos means food that absorbs from the chatos. Over there, when we say it absorbs of the chatos, it gets the same laws as the chatos. So whatever it was absorbed to, the food that absorbed from the chatos, gets to be like the chatos, which means if you're not allowed to eat it, you have to eat it only like the chatos, and all the stringency. If the chatos is puzzled, then that's also puzzled. Basically, we see that the isser there is not a gezedes hakosuv, it's like a stringency because it's a chatos. Over there, we say it becomes like the chatos because it absorbed the chatos. That's why Rashi learns also when we say beklei cheres bushola, that it means that the cheres absorbed from the chatos and therefore it became nicer. Let's look inside. Yes, Leimar Habiyur Bazeh, we can say the explanation in the posik shalifnei zog the Torah tzvei dinim chalukim binyaneim. The previous posik that precedes the posik of Imbekli Cheres B'Shala, the Torah says two different halachas which are different in their matters. Aleph, one din is adin b'shayches mit bosor hachatos. That is a law which is related, connected to the meat of the chatos versus the blood of the chatos. You have the meat of the chatos, the flesh of the chatos, and then you have the blood of the chatos. So the pasuk talks in the previous pasuk about something that touches the flesh of the chatos. Over there, the pasuk says, "Koil asher yiga b'v'sodro yigdosh." Anything that touches the flesh of the chatos, and here yiga means it absorbs from the flesh of the chatos. Over here, the flesh is a logical din versus the blood of the chatos, that's specially by chatos. Over here, if you touch the chatos, means you absorb from the chatos. That means was mean. What does it mean? Touch. It doesn't just mean touch. It does mean kipirush Rashi. Rashi said, "Kol davar oichel, kol davar oichel asher yiga v'yivla mimenu." Any item of food that will touch, touch means and will absorb from it. So absorbing from the flesh of the chatos, from the meat of the chatos, becomes yigdosh. So what does it mean? Vibal der tam bosor hachatos ver nivla in a Yivla, the taste of the chatos meat becomes absorbed in the food that touches it. Der faris der din, Rashi is mefarish, and that's what Rashi, the halach is, as Rashi explained, yigdosh. What does it mean, yiga b'sora yigdosh? It becomes also holy like the chatos. Yigdosh liyois kimoyha, to be just like the chatos. Im psula chulu, because it absorbed from the chatos, it gets the same status as the chatos. If the chatos is pasul, so then the food that has the chatas in it is also pasul because it has from the food of the chatas in it. And toichal, if it's ksheda, toichal kichaymer sheba. You have to eat it like the more stringent. So like by chatas that you can only eat till the nighttime, can only eat it in the azora. So anything that was Beleya, say it was a shlomim that touched it, was Beleya from the chatos, gets the stringency of the chatos. Why does it get the stringency of the chatos? Because it has a chatos in it. It became like the chatos because it absorbed the chatos. That's the law with regards to the flesh of the chatos. Then we have a separate din, which is dam, which is exeris hakosu b'chatos. This din that we're just saying now that it absorbs, you get the chaymer, isn't unique to chatos. That's a din, that's a logical din, because it absorbed the chatos, it becomes like the chatos. Pasul or whatever time you can eat it. But we have a second din, a din, b'shayches mitam chatos. That is connected to the blood of the chatos. The Torah says, the second part of that pasuk, that if it falls, it drips from the blood, sprinkled from the blood onto the garment, then you must wash it in a mokum kodesh. We're not saying it doesn't become a beged doesn't become kodesh or anything, but we get a new halacha where you have to wash it over there in the mokum kodesh. And in them is their diuk over here. The emphasis is yaze. Yaze means it's not like the whole garment turned to a chatos. Yaze means sprinkled, means you have one spot. This garment did not become like a chatos. This garment, by the bosor that was beleya from the chatos, that bosor, the whole bosor that was beleya, becomes like the chatos. Over here, we isolate the place of the blood, and we say that blood of chatos, which is in the garment, has to be washed b'mokum kodesh. So the din b'shayches mitam chatos, v'asher yizeh midom ala beged chabez b'mokum kodesh, and in them is their diuk yazeh. Over here, it's sprinkled as is nit came belia be'oifen. It is not absorbed in a way we're saying now, oh, this garment is a chatos garment. No. As der dam, we're not saying the dam wird nis arev. In klolus metzius a beged. In the general, this is a beged that has chatos in it. So therefore, you have to wash the whole beged, or you have to, it's not the whole beged, it's just a spot. Nor Torah sagt, what does Torah say? As bald in beged gefindt sich dam chatos, since in the garment you have some blood of chatos, darf der dam herausgenommen werden vom beged, then you must remove it from the garment. It's not like the beged absorbed a chatos and became chatos. It's just we want to get rid of that dam which is in the beged. Tchabes, have to wash it. High timer. And for that reason, because it's not that the whole beged became a chatas beged, became tainted by the fact that it had some chatas blood, you don't have to wash the whole beged. You only wash that spot. My time is the chiyuv kibus, the obligation to wash, nitav klolus habeged, not on the general garment. No kipirush Rashi blois mokam adam. As Rashi said, only the spot of the blood. So since we see that the previous case, when we talk about what was absorbed by the bosor, over there we say it was blias bosor. So before we're talking another piece of meat touched the bosor, and over there the pshat is that that meat that touched the bosor, touched meaning it absorbed from the bosor of chatos, becomes bosor chatos kamoiha. So it follows that the pot in which you cook the basar chatos, we're not going to say it's like the dam, which is a gzeres hakosu by chatos. First, we're talking about when the basar touches the basar chatos, and it absorbs from the basar chatos, that it becomes like the basar chatos. And now we're talking that the pot in which you cook the basar chatos, talking about the basar chatos, und the riber, and therefore, when es kommt zum posik, ukli cheres asher tevushal boy, the kli cheres in which you cook in it, achisorin mitzad blias habasar bekeli. Now, what happens is, lacking now you have meat, the flesh of the chatos. We're not talking about dam here. We're talking about the flesh of the chatos being absorbed in the keli. Over here, it's absorbed through cooking. You're cooking in the pot, and the pot gets from that chatos just like the previous case when it was nivla in another piece of meat. Is mistaber zu sagen, so therefore it's reasonable to say, as der Fall is not in Geder von Asher Yazeh Medoma, that this case is not the same definition as the sprinkling of the blood, nor in Zelbun Sug, but rather it's in the same category wie der Din von Kol Asher Yiga v'yivla b'vsora. It is the same law as the pasuk says, anything that touches, which means absorbs from the meat of the chatos, we said kodesh turns to becomes like the chatos. Same thing is the pot in which you cook becomes like the chatos, das heißt, which really means the way it's split up. Frier zog the Torah dem din von blias haboser in advar eichel. First, the Torah says about the absorbing of the meat in a food item. Und noch dem din von blias haboser bikli. And then the pasuk talks about the absorbing of the basar in the kelim. So that's why Rashi doesn't want to learn that it's the same reasoning as by the dam, which is the chumrah of chatos, but Rashi learns that it's because of the belia of the basar, so that it fits with the belia of the basar before basar from the basar and the keli from the basar. When the high time I learned Rashi, and for this reason Rashi learns as the tam from Yeshover, the reason why we need to break it is not mitzad chaymer achatos. Not because you cooked and there's a chatos being cooked, and chatos is such a strict korban, you have to break the pot you cook it in. Nor just like by the garment that gets blood, it has to be taken out, or in this case would be broken. Nor mitzad dem isur noiser. I said noiser because then, well, demult hoben beide dinim, then both halachas. Anything that touches absorbs food that absorbs from the meat of the chatos. And a pot which absorbs from the meat of the chatos. Themselves together, they have the same, they're defined the same way. Just as the halacha that everything that absorbs, food that absorbs in the meat of the chatos becomes kodesh, turns into chatos, and it's not agzeres hakosuv. It is not agzeres hakosuv mitzat chaymer chatos. It's not a decree of the pasuk because chatos is stringent, because this halacha applies also by mincha. We find demselben din euch frier by mincha. We find the same halacha earlier by mincha. It says that koil asher yiga bahem yigdosh. If somebody touches the mincha is kodesh kadoshim. If kochim kalim touch the migdosh, in other words, they absorb from the mincha, they will become like the kochim kalim. Rashi Shom. Rashi explains there, kochim kalim oichulin sheyigu. If you have the light kochim, which can be eaten all in Yerushalayim, or you have chulin, happen to be touching the mincha. And yiguba also means they absorb from it. Yekadishli is kemaya to be like chulu. So it's not a chiddush din by chatos; it's a din also by menachos. So therefore, we're saying no, this is an inyan shabisvara, but this is an idea of logic, as the blias tam habosar, because it absorbs the taste of the meat, whether it's the food or the pot. Poilt of them davar shaboyhu balua. That impacts the item in which he is absorbed in. The chatos impacts the food, impacts the pot. Und the far is nase kamayo. That's why it becomes like the item that was absorbed. It becomes like the chatos. That's logic. That's why when it cooks in a earthenware, the earthenware absorbed the chatos, it becomes like the chatos. So because that's look al derech zeis the din for b'liya b'klicheres. So similar, we should say, just like when it absorbs in another piece of oichel, it becomes like the oichel, and that's a din also menoches. By a mincha, it'll always become. So therefore, the din of b'liya b'klicheres nita gzeres hakosu mitzad chomer chatos. Hachatos is not a decree. The post says because of the severity of chatos. Not ha'inyan shel svara. This would be an idea of logic. This is also applies with fits with other kochim. Lefi shehabliya shenivlaz boy nase noiser. It becomes like the other what it was absorbed, and the absorbed becomes nicer. And this would all kochim. It's a logical thing. It becomes nicer. This always answers the question the Rebbe asked earlier. Why does Rashi learn that it is mitzad de blia? The Rebbe argued that blia is hard to say noiser on blia. And the Rebbe said that what Rashi should have seemingly said that this is the Achidush of Chatos because it's a very of Chatos, not because of the Blia. The Rebbe explains now because this fits in the flow with the previous pasuk, which talks about when food touches the meat of the Chatos, in which over there it's the Blia. So it makes sense that here's the Blia too, that it's a logical thing. So therefore, it becomes like what it absorbed, and since it absorbed the chatos or any other kachim for that matter, the item becomes like it, and it would become nicer because it becomes like that matter. And now the Rebbe answers based on this. We also understand the other question the Rebbe asked. Why don't we know just from Yeshaver alone that it never goes out? Because the Rebbe is going to argue that one can say, because the keli absorbed noiser, so the bekeli became a noiser dike keli. It absorbed noiser in it. So maybe a keli which has turned into noiser, the whole keli becomes asur. So even if you would be able to take out by the Klei Cheres, maybe the Torah still says Yeshover because it had noiser in it, or it'll have noiser in it, so therefore you should break it. But it doesn't mean, how do we know that it will never go out? Maybe it will go out, but the Torah still doesn't want a keli that had absorbed for it to become, for it to exist. You have to break it right away. Only after the Torah says that a klei nechoshes no is okay because it goes out. So I say, oh no, just because it had nicer in it doesn't make it, uh, doesn't answer it. So why should the klei? That's how you know that it never goes out from the klei cheres. Let's look at some. Abdalet, Alpizeh is verantwortet. Based on this, also answered. Kavosmen can it uplernen von Yeshover. Why we can't learn from Yeshover as klicheres eine yotze medei dofi lo'olam, that a klicheres never leaves the absorption, will never fully leave the pot, the walls. Chotz der tam von Yeshover is mitzad der b'liyah shabois. We're saying that you break it because it absorbed. So why would you break it if you can get rid of it? And the Rebbe argued before expelling it would be better. So why would the Torah say Yishaver? It must be that you cannot expel it. So why does Rashi say only from the Nechoy, when it says by the Nechoshis it does go out? The Rebbe explains. Bald der Din von Uklei Cheres Yishover kommt behemshach zum Din kol yiga b'vsore yigdosh. Since when we say that you break the Kli Cheres is a follow-up to the Din that we said before that kol yiga b'vsore yigdosh means that meat, the food that touches the chatos, turns into like the chatos. So therefore it should come out as the din von Yishover is al derech with der din von Yigdash. When you say you break it, this is parallels the din. Over there we say it becomes Kadesh. Over here you say Yishover. Parallel is al derech Kadesh. Punkt vidurch der Belia is der Dvar Eichel. In the Dvar Eichel, just as the absorption in the food matter from the Basara Chatos. Where the Eichel Kamaya, the Eichel turns into a Chatos, becomes like the Chatos gets all the laws the Chatos. As the Nei Habos or Habalua Trogen Zicha Riber, that the laws of this meat that has been absorbed from the Chatos, so they get carried over of them, Dvar Eichel. So whatever laws apply to the absorbed, to the chatos, transferred to the food that absorbed the chatos in it. Al derech zeh is by der keli v'sot belei given mipsara chatos. Similarly, is also by the vessel that absorbed from the meat of the chatos, as der din von yishover, that the din that we're saying that is breaking is nit nor mitzad der blia shaboy. It's not just because it absorbed the noiser, nor oich mitzad der keli, but it's also the keli. Now you have, just like there you have meat that had chatas in it, now the keli. About imagine that the keli is a piece of meat. Say that the meat became chatas. This keli became chatas because it has chatas in it. The keli hot in sich blias noiser. It has the absorption of the noiser legt sich auf der keli adin sreifo shvira. That's why it has it absorbed noiser. So therefore, on the keli we apply a law of sreifa shvira ki ilu neimar, as if to say as the keli vert noiser, as if to say the keli becomes left over because it absorbs chatos and the chatos is left over. So therefore, so it doesn't matter that you're able to take it out or not, but you have now a problem that this keli, the chatos transferred to the keli, and now it's a keli, whatever the chatos is, and therefore it becomes nicer. The keli becomes nicer. Und der Fall kann man von dem din Yishover nicht wissen. That's why from the din that you should break it, you can't know as klicheres that the earthenware does never goes out from all of the absorption. Even if you could have the expelling what it absorbed, is nachals doder chiv yishaver, there would still be the obligation to break it of their keli, on the keli. To lead them was their isur balua, the prohibition of being absorbed, that it should be like the chatos, because it is belua from noisar, and therefore it doesn't help that you can take it out. You're going to take out the noisar, but the whole keli became already a noisar keli. Just like the oichel turned into whatever that oichel was. But davke noch dem wie me weis dem din, umerig v'shutav, by kleine choishes, only after we know the halacha, that when you rinse off and you kasher, you polish, and you say by kleine choishes, as by kleine choishes is genug the plate sablia. But by kleine choishes it's sufficient, the expelling what it absorbed, durch meriko stiefel, us is nicht kin chiyuv zu ma'abed sein die kli. And there is not an obligation to destroy the keli because the keli was a nicer the keli. In their side, then by klicheres is nit der din, and by klicheres we say you have to break it. You can't expel. Let it man der fun up. We learn up as by klicheres is nit shaykh liflet as bliose. You're not. It doesn't apply. You can never take out the blia. Limdach hakosuf kan. So here we see sheni yitzim edof yiloilom. It'll never go out, and therefore it'll always be belua from Nisa. So the Rebbe explains there might, if not, if the Torah just said Yeshover, you might have thought because the Kli experienced Noiser, which means it absorbed blood, which will become Noiser in it. That means it absorbed Noiser. It becomes just like the Chatas, which is that when it's Noiser, so this will become Noiser too. And it'll be Noiser. And therefore, maybe you have to break the keli. But since the Torah says that by a kli nechoshes, the fact that it will become nicer doesn't prevent me from going ahead and morig v'shota b'mayim. That means that there's no din of having to break the keli because it was kamoya, because it was like the chatos, it had nicer in it. But you kasher it, and then there's no nicer, there's not a problem. So that's how we know. But the klicheres, why does the Torah say Yeshover? It must be that over there is a yotze midei daf yilayla. So, but the question is that, okay, you're proving to me that there's a difference. By klicheres, it doesn't go out, and that's why you don't have to break it. That's why you have to break it. But by a clay nechoshes, it does come out. But if it had nicer in it, by a clay nechoshes, the absorption that it absorbed, it had nicer. Why taka don't we require to break the? It is like nicer needs to be burnt, or in this case, needs to be broken. The vessel. How come you can fix it just by taking out the spot, the absorption of it, and we don't say that the whole keli became a vessel that had noise in it, and therefore you should have to break it also. Hey, as bleibt aber nicht musber, it still remains not clarified, not explained. Wie bald das euch die kleine Choishes hat in sich gehad blies isur noiser, since also the copper vessel also had
someone is at the front
the
door.
isur nechoshes. Also gedacht legen achiv von Yeshover, so there should have been an obligation to break it if their kli afilu noch der pleites hablia lechere, even after the klei nechoshes has been the chatos that it the blia from the pot from the chatos that are cooked in it has been taken out. Umoyrek v'shuta b'mayim, but it's still the keli should be a keli that had nicer in it. Wollt man davon gekent medayik sein? So what could you therefore derive? But it doesn't. That's not the halacha. As the tam von Yeshover by klicheres is that what is the reason why you have to break the klicheres? Nit adin of der keli gufa. So it's not because the keli absorbed itself, nor blois zu lieb der blia was ken nit niflat werden von a klicheres. So the only difference is between the klicheres, because by klicheres the blia doesn't come out, and by a klinechoishes it comes out. Because you see, when it does come out, the klinechoishes is okay. You don't, you're done. So therefore, why a klicheres? A klicheres that absorbed is no different than the klinechoishes, only in the fact that from the klinechoishes you can take it out, and from the klicheres you can't take it out. So, but it's not because the vessel itself is yeshover, because it had, just like we said before, by when the basar, when an oichel touches the basar over there, the oichel becomes like the basar. So over here, the keli, but here we see that it doesn't really happen, because after you uh, after you kasher, you put the moiruk v'shuta b'mayim by the uh, klenechoshes, you don't have to break the keli anymore. So maybe by the, it's also the same thing as by the klicheres. It's not yishover because it was kamoya like the chatas, just because you had the blood absorbing it. Aber das Rashi durch mafsig sein zwischen den zwei Perushim. So Rashi cautions you by this, by interrupting between these two interpretations. Wegen dem Din von Kleicheres und Kleinechoshes. He brings in mit dem Pirush von Wort und by interpreting the word of rinsing off in between these two Perushim. And Rashi says, Loshon Tamruki Hanoshim, it's like the polishing and the beautifying that the women do. Was meint wie Rashi teacht the Megillas Esther? What is Tamruki Hanoshim? What does Rashi translate Megillas Esther? The Vorim Hamitzachtzechim, those are items that shine, polish, beautified. Und the Mild will Rashi herausbringen, and Rashi wants to bring out of here as the din von umoirak, that when it says here to clean, is bedugmet zu dem din kibus von dam chatus. That over here, when you put through, when you rinse it off, this is similar to taking out the blood of the chatos that is accomplished by the kleine choishes when you are mitzachzach b'hainu. And that is like this. So it turns out that there's two dinim in the previous pasuk, and there's two dinim in our pasuk. The first din in that pasuk with the first din in our pasuk, and the second din of that pasuk with the second din in our pasuk. Behind the zwei dinim in unser pasuk, the two halachas in our pasuk, ukli cheres goimer, ve'im kli nechoshes goimer. The difference between the earthenware vessel and the copper vessel, seine me'ein the zwei dinim von frierdikem pasuk, they are similar to the two laws of the previous pasuk, which is talking about koila shiriga, when the touching the meat, vashayazim edomo, and that you have the blood on the garment. Aleph. Der dinu kleicheres goimer, from welchen es ken nit niflat werden de blia. When we talk about an earthenware from which the absorption cannot be expelled, is bedugma den din von kol asher yigoba goimer. Is similar to the din in which a piece of oichel, some food, touches the meat of the chatos. Whatever touches that cannot go out from the food. It's stuck in there, like in the klicheres, whatever goes in there is stuck in there. Is bedung dem din koshiga? Dover oichel asher yiga b'yivla mimenu. That's a food item that touches and absorbs from the chatos. Was hayois as von dem dvar oichel kann man nicht möchte sein die Blie vom Sarah Kodesh. From the food item, you cannot extract what has been absorbed from the Besara Kodesh. Therefore is der din yigdosh. Liyas kemoiso. V'asher yaze midomo that it falls asher yiga mimeno, that the food cannot be done. That's why yigdosh, it turns into the chatos. The klicheres cannot also expel the absorption of the chatos. It turns like the chatos. Main zeis baklicheres. As es wird kamoya, wie the blias noiser. It becomes like the chatos, which is that it absorbs the noiser, and therefore it becomes like it. That's why on that vessel there is the obligation that you have to break it. That's the number one. The second din, the din for im kleine choishes goimer, then you have the copper vessel. Can je von sich peilet sein, die blia, that is able to expel. That is similar to the garment. Is main dem din von washe yizem edom ala beged, that if there is blood on the garment, was wie bald man can nemen dem dam von dem beged, since you can take out the blood in the garment, is der din nit yigdosh liyas k'moiso. Over there, it doesn't become liyas k'moiso because you can take it out, nor to chavis. In mein zei binyanenu. About the blia can niflot werden von der kleine choishe, since the absorption can be expelled, taken out from the kleine choishes, legt sich nit kein chiyuv sreifes, shviras neiser von keli, doesn't apply an obligation to burn or breaking the nicer on the keli, because it never really fully absorbed it. It's like the garment. Nor blazer der bli, only on the absorption. So basically, it really depends on if it's something which you cannot expel from, then that thing turns into the chatos. If the chatos touches food, you can't expel from it. That chatos yigdosh becomes like the chatos. The keli, klicheres, that you cannot expel from it, becomes like the chatos when you're cooking it. And therefore, over there is yishaver. Lepoil mamash yishaver, you have to break it. The proof is take from klicheres, because otherwise, why would you have to break it? But the bottom line is you do have to break it because it turned into the chatos, because you can't take it out of the chatos. The second din by a beged, and where you can take out the spot and where the blood fell, that is the same din as cooking in a clean choshe, since it could come out. So the vessel doesn't turn in to a chatos, because you wash it down and then you take out the blood from it, what you absorbed, and then the keli does not have to be burnt, that have to be broken. And now the Rebbe comes up with another Gavaldik Chiddush over here. In addition to, this is like learn this and learn this and learn this, but apizevo. Azu moirek v'shutav is bedugma zum din chabes by dam chatas. Just like over there we're washing it, here you're washing the keli. Yesh lemer yisayim mizeh. So the Rebbe is going to come up now with a whole nother chiddush. The whole time we're talking about noiser, it's going to answer the other questions too. At the time that it absorbs, it's not nicer yet. It's only going to be nicer later on. The Rebbe is going to come up here with a chiddush that the fact that you can't absorb it makes it nicer then. What's the idea of nicer? The idea of nicer is that you can't eat it. The minute it goes into the keli, even before it passes the time of the achilas hakol. Let's look inside. Is bedugmas to din techabes badam chatos. This is similar to the washing by the dam chatos, in which you wash it off. Here you wash it off from the keli. Yeshleimer Yisayim, we can say more. As der mitvos Rashi is massig zwischen the zwei Perushim mit dem Teich from where Rashi interrupts these two Perushim to tell you that it's different. Daiteter on, he's actually pointing to as the din von umoiret v'shoitev is nicht bedeumet zu din von Yeshover. It's not the same din. Umoiret v'shoitev is not the same din of Yeshover. Moiret v'shoitev is to get rid of the absorbed of the noiser. But by Yeshover, it becomes nicer right away. It's a different. You don't break it because you're not going to be able to get it out later on. You break it because it becomes nicer now. Am so sagen, as beide tun, auf demselben Indien. Sreifas nicer. That they both do the same thing. We'll say, breaking the vessel and getting rid of the absorbed chatos that's in the keli, in the nechoshes, is the same. That made the tuna zelmaninyan, which is sreifas noiser, burning the noiser. Nor bas gleicheres was eine yetze mit the dafyu leilom is as durch yeshover. Over there, the way you do it is by breaking. So that means you're accomplishing the same thing. You got to get rid of the noiser. So by a klicheres, the way to get rid is by breaking it. And by a klinechaishes, you get rid by expelling it. No. Notice is an undergether. It's a total different definition. Pung vider din von techabes bei dam chatus is nicht verbunden mit an isur oder pesul. The lochef of having to wash when talked by the dam chatus, that to clean that garment, isn't associated, not tied to an isur or disqualification in them dam. Dam is not, nor beim dam chatus or teure mechadish given. By the blood of the chatus, the Torah gave a novelty, as in fall from yazim medom ala beged. There's no noiser in the garment, nothing happening. The Torah was mechadish. It's not an isur over there when the blood is on the garment. Torah came up with the novelty, as in fall from yazim. There's no noise. Blood doesn't have noiser. Doesn't apply any isur in there. The Torah said, as in a fall from yazim medom ala beged, is the achim from the chabes, there is an obligation to wash it. Al derech ze by v'im b'klei nechoshes b'sholo, if it's cooked in a klei nechoshes, is the chiyuv from a moedek v'shutef livlet as blia. Also, you have to remove the blia, just like washing the garment. Nit mitzadem isur noiser. It's not because of the prohibition of noiser. You got to get rid of it in their blia, wie by klei cheres at the bushel boy, the same as by klei cheres. Nor tzli dem geder from bosor chatos shabo, but it is because the bosor chatos that's in it, in the klei nechoshes, kedlekamas yivzayin ches, and that's why the Torah was mechadish, just like the dam from the chatos. This has bosor of the chatas in it. That's why you have to wash it. And their meat wird man verstehen dem tam hashinui. Now we'll understand the reason for the change. Was by giuli nochrim is the loshen haposik when we talks about kashering, that the vessels that have been absorbed from the goyishe, from treif, from non-kosher stuff, giulim of the nochrim, is the lashon haposik called davar sheyover be'esh taviru be'esh. Any item that was used with fire, you have to get rid of it through fire. Rashi teach dorten, as Rashi translates there, kederech tashmish agalose, the way you used it, that's how you have to kasher, that's how you remove it, that's how you expel it. Mashe tashmish al deichale chamin yigalenu bechamin. That which is used through hot, you should kosher it through hot. Mashe enkin do state over here. It says umoirak v'shutav b'mayim. It says you should polish it up, shine it up, and rinse it down in water. By hagola fun advar isur, because when you're kashering from advar isur, is the iker mekuven. The main intent over there is to mevatel and the blisa isur. We want to get rid of that absorbing the isur. V'shdem is genug yagilanu bechamin. If you kasher it in warm water, you are taking out the isur. Mashenkin the dinu fun meiruk v'shoyter by chatos. But over here, when we say you have to rinse it off and you have to put it in the in my magola is bedoimet zum din miyuchad by dam chatos from kibbutz habeged. That is especially similar to the special din by dam chatos by the washing of the garment. Und the river is nit genug hagola lechud velchis mevatel de beluya. That's why it's not sufficient just to kasher it, which would take away the beluya. The be'esh wouldn't help it. But the yiflit as bliyosei that reside in an eifun, but the way it expels the blia, it needs to be an eifun merik b'shata b'mayim. It needs to polish it. It needs to rinse it off mit sachzach sein und oishvenk in the keli. You gotta polish it up and rinse out the keli. Bedugma zum kibbutz, because here, similar to kibbutz, here the intent is not getting rid of the Geuli Nachum, yeah, we're getting rid of that also, but that's how the Geulim from the Chatos, what's in there. But that's not the intent of it. Here the intent is to, like the Xeris Kosov, just because you had Dam Chatos in here, over here you have, like by the Dam Chatos on the garment, here you had the Basar Chatos in the Keli, you got to rinse out that Keli from that absorption, but just doing in fire is not going to be sufficient. And the Rebbe is going to continue to explain later on this whole Aniyan in Ois Zayin. So it turns out, according to the Rebbe's explanation, that actually things are switched around. That the clay, the chayshes, which over there, which the nicer can come out, over there we're saying, no, it has a special halacha. Over there's a din of moirak v'shuta b'mayim. You have to rinse off the keli. It's like washing the garment. It's almost like agzeres hakosuv by chatos. And by klei which is never, doesn't leave, over there it's the din of noiser, and the fact that yishbereno, that's just like we said in the pasuk, when the basar touches the chatos, that it becomes kamoyu. And the Rebbe will now explain this. That take, why is this so? The Rebbe will explain that when does it become noiser? We're not saying, we're talking about noiser, but noiser only becomes after the nighttime. But here we're saying that it's beleya the noiser. The Rebbe argues that once it's nivla in an item which cannot be expelled, it becomes noiser at that point because it can never be eaten. If it's a balua in a thing that can be kasher, that you can be moitzi, then it doesn't become taka noiser then. So then it's taka not noiser, not balua noiser, and lova then there's exeris hakosu, moirek v'shuta b'mayim, just like by the dam on the beged that you have to wash it. Let's look inside. This is the Gavaldik. Zayin. But mit das Verstehen behagdim the Shailas at all. So we'll understand this by first introduce the question that we asked before, Seif Sif Aleph, in the end of Sif Aleph. We pass the Shem Neser of Blia. How do we how does the name Noiser fit on something which is absorbed? For was geht nicht on the Teure dem Zmans Reifos Yeshover? Why doesn't the Torah say when you have to burn it, or in this case, break it? Don't have to break it immediately, would seem, the pashtus, because Noiser becomes after the day, just like the Chatas Noiser. The Rebbe says no. But Rashi forewarns this. He cautions us by using the language. Rashi doesn't say it's going to be nicer later on. When it absorbs, at the time that it absorbs, that's when it becomes Rashi. That's when it becomes nicer. What Rashi means, as mider b'liya gufa vertes bald nicer. The absorber, as soon as it absorbs, it becomes nicer. That's borinda. Why does it become nicer? Immediately, not even after the zman of achilas chatos. Explanation then, the gather for nicer al derech hapshat. What is nicer, according to Pshat, is not as achila l'achar zmano vert nishapich in a isur nicer. It's not that eating after the time turns it into an isur nicer. But nor der bosser vert nicer to leave der efshorius of achila. The reason the bosser becomes nicer, you can't eat it. Since you can't eat it, then it becomes nicer. It's not that time makes it nicer, it's the impossibility of eating makes it nicer. It's impossible after the time. But it's not the time that causes it, it's because you can't eat it. This haste. By Bosor Kochim the Torah Masine given zwei chiyuvim. By Kochim meat, the Torah conditioned two obligations. Iker chiyuv is l'choil roish, the main obligation. First and foremost, mitzvahs achilosi kozman megases, the mitzvah to eat it for as long you can eat it. Oid mikenes ober nit essen, but if you can't eat it, tormen es nit losen stam liegen. You're not allowed to let it just lay around. Nor medafes gleich verbrennen, you have to burn it immediately. Und das ist euch die Hasbore. The Rebbe says, whether you have to burn immediately. The Rebbe says a pipshat, as soon as it's nicer, you have to burn it. But this is also the explanation with regards to what it absorbed. The meat gufa was the tama boser vet nivle nakli unvert oisoichem. The fact that the taste of the meat becomes absorbed in a vessel and is no longer food, vert is gleich noiser. That is immediately leftover. Umen darf es verbrennen, you have to burn it. Und der Fall is der din, that's what the din is, as kli cheres, asher tevushel b'yishav, you have to break it right away, it's noiser. Es legt sich gleich of them der chiyuv was reifas noiser. Immediately there is the obligation of burning noiser. Was by bli b'kli cheres is as durch yishover. How do you burn by kli cheres? You can't burn it. So you break it. That's the immediately. And the Rebbe says this is phenomenal now because the truth of the matter is if it only becomes nicer after the time and after 24 hours, the absorbed become nice and tam liv gam. So why it's not even nicer? So all the Mefarshim are wondering, why is it even nicer? According to the opinion that the one night makes it already tam liv gam. It's laying in the vessel before it can become nicer. It's actually liv gam. So why do you even have to break the klecheres? Mefarshim ask on Rashi, but the Rebbe says it's not even a question in the first place because according to Rashi, it becomes nicer as soon as you cook it because once it loses, it's no longer an achila. It's now it's in the walls. It's been absorbed. That's nicer. Und das sieht man wie Rashi bediuk l'shoinei. And here you see Rashi with the precise language. He answers and he cautions that a great lengthy debate in Mefarshim. The Ram, der Yom Mizrachi fragt of Rashi, he asked Rashi, "Wavos darf man zu brechen dem klicheres? Why do you have to break the earthenware to leave them was the because the absorbed that was absorbed in the keli became left over. According to the opinion that even one night, 12 hours, the night is already defects, so it's a pagam, it's the tam liv gam. But is that's Rashi, it's also Rashi's opinion that linas lailo is pagam. We don't need 24 hours. Kumtois, it turns out, as Ba'is Mamba Boiker, that at that time in the morning was say from Bosad of Chalza in the Isur Noiser, on which the meat will have the Isur Noiser because it's already the morning. Is a Shendana Dover Mutter, it becomes a permissible Zayin Dika Noisin Tam Lev Gam, because it gives a taste of Gam. So the absorbed tam of the chatos that's in the keli has become already blemished, and the blemish, so you can use it. Why do we have to break the klecheres? But the Rebbe's explanation is kushim mikora lesson. It's not that it becomes nicer after 12 hours after the morning. It's not a valid Rashi b'pirusha la Torah, but it's mefarad pshut mikra. According to Rashi in his commentary on the Torah, which he explains the simple meaning of the pasuk is oiv der bli achal gleich der is neiser zusammen mit nechiv sreifa. So for that absorbing immediately, there is the isur neiser together with the obligation to burn it. It becomes nicer the fact that it was absorbed. It came from an oichel into the keli, then you have to burn it because it's not shaykh anymore to be used. And now we'll go back to see the differences that Rebbe brought out before between the halacha of a klicheres, in which you break it to get rid of noiser, over there the isser is noiser, and the rinsing and rinsing off and meirak and polishing and getting it ready, which is like the dam, which is a special halacha with regards to the keli by achatos. Oder geder. This definition as dur the bliya atzma shaft sich der isur noiser, that through the bli comes the isur of noiser, that creates the isur noiser. Yesh leimar, you can say is blois back licheres. That only applies to klecheres. But eina yotzim midei dofya lo'ilam can never go out of that absorbed forever. It always stays there. As the beliyas will come the achila, and it's impossible that was absorbed should come. You should eat it. In no way you can't even cook anything in there to get back from the walls into the food because it never leaves it. So therefore, it becomes nicer. When the farvet is nicer, that's why it becomes nicer. Und das is the Teuchen von der Chiyuv Shvira. And this is the idea, the content. What is the obligation to break it? Adin for Sreifas Noiser. That is a halacha to burn Noiser. Okay, Pirush Rashi, as Rashi says, that became Noiser, that was swallowed in there. As opposed to copperware, with the Blia, can ya niflot werden, where the absorbent can be expelled. Just absorbing does not make it nicer. You have not negated yet the possibility of eating. In their keli, you can make another food, cook something else in this keli. And that absorbing, that is fully expelled into the food, will be eaten with the food, so it's not going to be nicer. So there's no, by definition, cooking it in a copper pot doesn't make it nicer because you can still eat it. So why does it need to be rinsed and cleaned out? It's not to expel the isur of noiser. No, it seems like also, especially according to Rashi's view, that even after 12 hours, it's not going to become nicer. But it's not. That's not the idea. That's only in order to clean the vessel from the taste of the basar hachatos. It's a din Gotta clean it up just like we want to clean the baguette from the chatos. We want to clean the vessel from the chat. Me'ein from kibbutz habeget from dam chatos. Similar of washing the garment from the blood of the chatos. Und das ist der Hemshech in Pirush Rashi. This is the flow, the way Rashi is continuation, the way Rashi writes it. Früher sind wir farish über kleine Choshes is der Chiyuv von Omeda. First, he explains that when it comes to copper vessel, the obligation is umeirak meloshim tamruki anoshim v'chulu. You have to wash it down, polish it up, clean it up. Clean up the vessel from the chatos. Bedugmat from din von the Chabes, similar to the law of washing that. Und das is der Teuchen von Lifleit as Bliose. This is the idea to expel the Blia an inyan from kibbutz. Take out, just like the garment, you get rid of what's absorbed to get rid of the garment of the chatos. Nit sreifas noiser, not burning noiser, just cleaning up the keli from what it is absorbed. And in order to explain this different, was by kleine choishes is the talking din noiser mitzad ablia, wie by klecheres. How come by kleine choishes there is no noiser like it is by klecheres? Because by kleine choishes it's not nicer because you can eat it later on. It doesn't come nicer just by the blia, mashenkin by the chatos, by the klecheres. Is Rashi mamshach avu klicheres limdach hakosov kan she'ene yitzim mit the dofil oilum. It teaches you that it never leaves the dofil oilum. So over there was the far shaft the blia but klicheres nice. That's what we give nicer. This is gewaldig. The Rebbe turns things around over here. The bottom line is the Rebbe says that klicheres is nicer by absorption, and you got to burn it right away because nicer has to be burned right away. By cleaning chayshes, it's not nicer. Then you got to clean away. You got to take out the blood, just like from and not take out the blood, take out the taste. Just like by the garment, you got to take out the blood, you got to take out the taste. But it has nothing to do with nicer. Test. From here we can learn out wondrous things according to halacha. The Rebbe says, "Bahagdim benegeya dem din." Benegeya. So the Rebbe brings out a halacha. Benegeya dem din from uklicheres goyim yishover goyim beklenachoshes umorek beshutev goyim is farana plukta zwischen dem Rambam and Ravid. There is a disagreement between the Rambam and the Ravid. Lo shitas Rambam, according to the view of the Rambam, is the din for klicheres goyim yishover hagzeres hakosuv davke by chatus. That's a special. The Pasuk decreed this only by chatus. Mashenkein meriko shtifa is a din by all kochim. That's a din by all kochim. The Ravid haltover, the Rabbi disagrees. As beide dinim, sai klicheres yishover umeriko shtifa bekleine chayshes seine bechol kochim. That's by all kochim. By all kochim, you also have to yishover. These shitas Rashi. What is Rashi's opinion? By yishover zokt Rashi, hu adin l'chol hakochim. That means that all kochim is also yishover. Mashenki by Amerik b'shut ha'mayim zokt dos nit Rashi. Rashi doesn't say it. Pashas learned men as beide dinen kum b'hemshech. They come in one following. B'meila darfes Rashi zogen nocham. He zogen nocham about kleine choshes. Doesn't have to say again by kleine choshes that this too moirek v'shuter b'mayim applies by all kochim. Apia nalober. But based on the above, he says bedavke. That is specific. That over there, it's moirek v'shuter b'mayim is not by all the karbonis. So kumtuis Shit's Rashi, Derech Hapshat, is a Dei Shlishi. This is the third, not like the Rambam, not like the Rambam. The din Yeshover was is Mitzat Reifas Neusar is Taka Ba'ala Kochim. That's Ba'ala Kochim. Mashenkin by all Kochim. Mashenkin der din von Umoirach Beshutaf is late Rashi, Bepshutish Amikra, Bem Dugma zum Din Tachabes. That's like washing it. Was is a Chaimer Miyuchad by Chatas. Or nicht Mitzat dem Din Neusar, not by Din Neusar. So it turns out that Merika Vishtifa is only by Chatos. And Klechazis Yeshover is everywhere, which is different than the Rambam and the Ravid. The Rebbe just brings in this whole new insight in the way the Rebbe teaches this whole psukim here, the Rashi here. It's tremendous insight, tremendous ideas that the Rebbe possesses. Need to go it over again. It's good for a first review. This is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Tzav Tovshin Lamed Vav.